Hello, and welcome back to the crusade to make tier lists on mundane things that no one argues about. Today, it's silverware. Forks, spoons, knives, the things we use to eat when we can't just use our appendages. Appendages, jeez. Um, I promise this one's gonna be much shorter than the whole workout fiasco. So I have a list here from homestratosphere.com called 19 different types of silverware, and we will be going through that. So our first item on the list is... Ooh, it showed up super big here. This is a salad fork. This is the fork that most of us know of. Slender, four tong, prong, I forget what they're called. Four points with which to stab your food. You know, it works, but it could be a little bigger. You know, imagine having this, but like twice as wide. You could stab into like 3 or 4 chicken nuggets with that instead of just like 1, 2 if you're skilled. It's about the perfect length for, you know, you're holding it. And I suppose it's pretty good for its intended purpose, which is salads. If you're just stabbing into like a lettuce leaf. I think I'm gonna put salad forks at A tier. Next is the dinner fork, which is basically the salad fork, but it kind of looks like the end splines are a little wider. I'm thinking I'm gonna put that in the same place right off the bat, because it's basically just as big as a salad fork. I'm wondering what the widened things are intended for. I'm thinking of it in the context of like steak or something like that. Like, how would those widened parts help? Let's see. According to the article, dinner forks are large enough to easily use for eating primary courses where meat is the main focus. They're affordable, apparently, too. They're basically just salad forks, but they look a little different. This is a dessert fork. 3-pronged. I get it. I feel like dessert is more meant to be savored slowly. Sort of like a cake. That's more meant to be sort of eaten little bit by little bit in order to be fully savored. And now I want cake. Anyway, this photo doesn't really indicate how long dessert forks are when it comes to being able to hold them. So, dessert forks, I'm gonna go S tier for them. And not only desserts, I feel like we all would be benefited if we could learn to eat our food a little more slowly. You know, savor it, take more time to eat it, potentially be more satisfied by less food. They're cute, too. Look at them. I didn't think I'd be calling forks cute today, but... Anyway, this is an oyster fork. I would assume it's pretty self-explanatory. It's for eating shellfish or not crustaceans, like mollusks or whatever. And it's slightly smaller than the dinner fork, it looks like. Looks like there's a little more space in between the... I'm sorry. Hey Google, what are the points on a fork called?
According to Wikipedia, the term tine is also used for mountains, such as the fictional Silvertine in The Lord of the Rings.
I knew it was something like that. There's a little more space in between the tines. I've never eaten an oyster before, so I can't... I don't really have that experience. How do you even eat, like, clams and oysters? Like, for some reason, in my mind, I just picture, like, you have the open shell on your plate and then just, like, goopy meat in there that you eat. Interestingly, this type of fork is the only kind that you are supposed to place to the right of your plate in fine dining etiquette. Huh. Today I learned. Actually, I feel like this whole list is going to be a today I learned. Because I didn't know there were oyster forks. I'm going to put that in A tier as well. Alright, so now we're delving into knife territory. This is, according to the article, this is called a table knife. Like, this right here is the metallic part. and it's just all handle. I don't. Like, realistically, I could probably do the job, but all of me is just screaming, what the fuck is this even gonna cut? Like, are you cutting friggin', like, chicken tenders? Chicken nuggets? Almost kind of makes me want to use the term small knife energy. I'm gonna put this so-called quote-unquote kitchen knife. No, kitchen knife? Table knife, my bad. I'm gonna put this so-called table knife in D tier. Because, like, what even is that? These are apparently butter knives. I sort of went my whole life thinking that your traditional metal knife, well, your traditional, like, rounded metal knife, that wasn't like these. It was longer and more slender, and it did have, like, a few. It wasn't even, like, that sharp, but there was a little bit of, like, cutting, sharp point things. Like, there was a cutting part to it. And I always called those butter knives. But apparently, these are butter knives. And I don't know what makes them special. Obviously, they're flatter. It doesn't even look like they could cut through much of anything, except for butter. Although, I feel like it would have decent spreading ability, as compared to what I thought was a butter knife. Because you do have more surface area there. But yeah, I gave these things a little bit of shit in the beginning, but I'm starting to kind of warm up to them. Although I don't know if they're like a miracle tool whatsoever. Like, I would imagine they're a bit better at spreading butter, but not by much. I don't have much experience either, though. I don't have much experience with most of these. Because I think the closest I've ever come to fine dining was a wedding I went to a few years back. I'm gonna put these in B tier. If you're not using butter or something that's almost like half liquid, these things are useless. Steak knives. Now these babies are where it's at. Like, these even look sharp. Now that I think about it, probably my best experience with, like, being picky about the sharpness of knives is whenever I have mushrooms. And I'm trying to slice up mushrooms to put them into a pan to stir fry them. Like, it's so frustrating when a knife just won't just cut through the mushroom without me having to move it a little bit. And then you have, like, a bunch of little pieces coming out of the mushroom. Sometimes you just, for that kind of thing, you need a good, clean slice. And steak knives do that easily. They can slice through meat, they can slice through a mushroom. I'm putting steak knives in A tier. Why A tier? Even after I gave them all that praise? Because, well, there is one area that steak knives are sorely lacking in, and that is their spreading ability. Steak knives lack the abilities that these butter knives here have. Granted, that's not much, but it's a crucial part of eating, I guess. So, steak knives, they can do almost everything, but not quite everything. Okay, this is what I went through my life thinking a butter knife was, but this is a dessert knife. It doesn't really look like it has much purpose at all. Like the butter knife, it can cut through extremely soft, like even liquidy things, like butter, jello, and I guess cake too. Just soft things like that. But it doesn't have the surface area that a butter knife has. Blueberry muffins are a dessert, right? Like, what if you want to spread butter on that blueberry muffin? What use does this thing have, aside from just cutting really soft things that you could just cut with a dessert fork anyway? And for that, I think dessert knives need to go in F tier. I don't use the term F tier lightly, but I think dessert knives deserve a dessert knives deserve that. Okay, there we go. Dessert forks pretty much just take their job from them. and they have no spreading ability like the butter knives do. Like, the butter knives have practically, like, they have nothing under their belt, but what they do have, they're pro at. So at least they have that going for them. But dessert knives, useless. Next, we have our traditional spoon, or as the article calls it, the teaspoon. As far as just eating food goes, like I went on earlier about, savoring your food, eating it slower, but I almost don't know if that applies to liquidy things that are just liquid anyway. Ramen, maybe. Maybe you want to savor that broth. But cereal? If you don't eat your cereal quick enough, that shit's getting soggy. Like, I feel like this barely puts anything in your mouth. It does its job, though. Teaspoons in this context go in C tier. Stirring, too. If you don't want to get out a huge-ass spoon just to stir something, the teaspoon would be perfect for it. Okay, this next image, they might not look too much different. Oh, and if you couldn't tell by now, we're in spoon territory now. These don't look too much different than the teaspoons, but they're tablespoons. I think these are the ones that I heard that they actually hold a tablespoon, so you can use them as measurement. Now these, of course, I would imagine everyone has like a personal preference when it comes to their perfect size of spoon. And I think these tablespoons, they do that for me. They hold a decent amount, but not too much. So you're getting a decent amount of food in your mouth every time, but you're not like you're not stuffing your mouth every time, but you're getting a good enough amount in there. And I don't know, something about just like the slightly elongated spoon holder, whatever it's called, it's kind of aesthetically pleasing to me too. And I genuinely cannot think of any downsides to these. So tablespoons, I think they deserve a nice spot in S tier. I don't think I've ever seen these before. These are dessert spoons, and you're not going to be able to see that defining ridge once I get it small enough, but let's briefly go over that. Are these intended for cake and things that you have to sort of slice? Because I can kind of get that. If for some reason you're eating something that your dessert fork can't quite get through, your dessert spoon should be able to do it just fine, because it's got like a little ridge on there that slices through that nice and easy. However, I feel like it'll have you eating a little more food at a time than with the dessert forks. So, like, pacing yourself wise, these might not be the best. But otherwise, like, they're sizable. They would do a good job holding the food that you need to. And they cut through your, and they have a little added tool for cutting through your food. So, I think we're gonna put dessert spoons at A tier. Oh my gosh, you're putting everything at A tier. Well, I never put anything down at F tier, but we got one down here too. Soup spoons. I seriously like the looks of these too. They look deep. They look like they give you just the right amount of food. Plentiful, but not an overly enormous amount. And I mean, that's actually pretty perfect for their intended purpose, which is soup. I feel like when you're eating something liquidy like that, you don't really want to, like, be too slow on that. Otherwise, you're just going to be drinking. You're not necessarily eating. So, soup spoons, perfect portion for everything, including what they're intended for. I'm putting these up in S tier as well. I think we have the moment you've all been waiting for. But sporks. I feel like everyone loves sporks. But I'm gonna go ahead and play devil's advocate here, or how I don't know if I'm using that term right, and put sporks in A tier rather than S tier. Of course, they're genius. They're both a spoon and a fork in one. We love efficiency. What more can you ask for? My problem is in the fork part. What do you normally eat with sporks? I'm trying to think of like school cafeteria food. Mac and cheese. What if you're trying to eat mac and cheese with this? Like, I feel like you could barely stab into the noodle enough. Not to mention, I feel like you could only stab into one, maybe two noodles at a time if you're skilled enough. So, less of a spork and more of a spork. More spoon than fork. And also, the spoon part, at least the sporks that I've dealt with, like, they're not deep at all. Like, I feel like if you were trying to eat soup with this thing, most of the soup would just run out the fork part. I wonder if I would have a different perspective on this if I was still in public school. Ugh, I feel so old saying that I'm gonna have been out of that for almost 4 years. Well, no, almost 3. Almost 4? Almost 4. Something like that. 3, 4 years I have been out of the public school system. So, I don't even remember the last time I've had to use a spork. I do briefly actually want to bring in, because the image of the plastic spork was a Google image. This is the image that they used for spork in the article. And I think this is what sporks need to be like. Look at that spoon capability. And then you have the tines of a fork, and they're actually long. They actually look like they could decently stab into something. Like, this would be prime ramen eating, like, silverware. Why aren't more sporks like this? Is it because it's lopsided? It's not symmetrical? This is where I gotta give points to fine dining. Just look at that. It's beautiful. That's where the list ends. So that's where this list is gonna end. Thank you so much for joining me for this one. I'm not sure what the next tier list is gonna be yet, but I do have an idea that was suggested to me. And if that one doesn't work, I will find something else. I will see you next time.